A Marine corporal advances in the third position of a stacked formation when the Marine directly ahead comes under fire from a lower stairwell. The location is Fallujah during November of 2004. Behind him, the automatic rifleman brings the M249 into firing position. He presses the trigger and only 9 rounds cycle before the system halts. It is not a failure to ignite. It is a stoppage caused by a jam in the belt feed. He immediately drops the weapon, opens the feed assembly, and clears the malfunction in under 10 seconds. 10 seconds in which the 2 Marines in front continue moving through the landing, relying only on their rifles. They still succeed in clearing the room. But this was not an isolated case. In that environment, the same kind of stoppage kept appearing with enough frequency that Marines who lived through it remembered it clearly. The automatic weapon that was meant to provide sustained covering fire was repeatedly failing at the exact moment it was needed most. The deeper explanation does not begin with a broken design. It begins with a weapon created for a battlefield that never fully came. In the early 1970s, Ernest Verviers developed the FN Minimi at Fabrique Nationale in Belgium. The design solved a long-standing infantry problem that had existed since the Korean War era. Small infantry units needed portable automatic firepower that was lighter than heavy machine guns but still capable of sustained suppression while maneuvering in teams. The Minimi provided belt-fed operation with up to 200 rounds available before reloading. It could also accept standard magazines as a backup feeding method. Its firing speed ranged between 700 and 1,000 rounds per minute. Without ammunition, it weighed about 17 pounds. With a full 200-round load, it reached roughly 22 pounds. The United States Army adopted it in 1984 under the designation M249 Squad Automatic Weapon, and many NATO forces followed the same path. This was not an arbitrary decision. It was based on Cold War planning assumptions focused on large-scale conventional conflict. For decades, NATO forces prepared for a possible Soviet advance through Central Europe, particularly across the Fulda Gap. Infantry squads in that context were expected to slow armored formations moving across open terrain, channel them into predictable zones, and sustain suppressive fire until heavier assets could engage. In that environment, long-range volume fire was the decisive factor, and the M249 fit that requirement. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, that strategic scenario disappeared, but the weapon remained in service. Eventually, it found itself deployed in Fallujah. Combat inside urban structures in Iraq bore no resemblance to the open terrain doctrine it had been designed for. Engagement distances collapsed from hundreds of meters to the span of a doorway or the depth of a narrow stairwell. A weapon built for distance and suppression now had to function in tight interior spaces. In those conditions, the M249's length of 41 inches became a disadvantage when moving through confined openings. Its loaded weight of 22 pounds made the automatic rifleman the slowest member of the fire team. Its distinctive belt-fed firing sound also made the shooter easy to identify in close quarters, environments where enemy fighters studied American movement patterns. A larger issue emerged from its structure within the squad. All automatic fire capability was concentrated into a single Marine carrying one specialized weapon. In open battlefield doctrine, that Marine could operate at range with support. In urban combat, he was positioned only a short distance behind the lead element and became vulnerable the moment his weapon failed. Reports from Iraq and Afghanistan repeatedly described stoppages linked to dust, heat, feed system issues, and unreliable magazine adapters under stress. When the weapon went down, the squad effectively lost its dedicated automatic firepower in an instant, reducing capability to standard rifles alone. The Marine Corps responded by analyzing these after-action reports systematically. Over time, a formal requirement emerged for a different solution. The next weapon had to be lighter, more dependable in desert conditions, accurate for aimed fire, and still capable of automatic function. But it also had to eliminate dependence on a single dedicated automatic rifleman. Instead of concentrating suppression into one role, the new approach would distribute that capability across the entire fire team. By 2009, the search resulted in a new selection. Heckler & Koch's infantry automatic rifle was adopted by the Marine Corps as the M27. The M27 operates using the HK4M16 operating system built around a gas piston mechanism. This design greatly improved reliability in environments where earlier weapons like the M249 had shown consistent weaknesses. It chambers 56 NATO ammunition and feeds from standard 30-round magazines. There is no belt system involved, no adapter for mixed feeding, and no separate mechanism that can become clogged by heat, dust, or battlefield debris. In its unloaded condition, the weapon weighs 7 and 9/10 pounds. This represents more than just a reduction compared to the M249. Even when the older system is fully loaded, the new rifle is still under half that total mass. That difference in weight reshaped how the weapon could be carried and used in combat. However, the most significant change was not physical or technical. It was conceptual. The transformation centered on how the Marine Corps understood the role of automatic fire inside the squad. At first, the M27 replaced the M249 in the same position within the fire team structure. It served as the weapon for a single designated automatic rifleman, maintaining the same organizational slot as before. The equipment changed, but the role structure initially stayed intact. That arrangement did not last. By 2018, the Marine Corps extended the concept further. Every infantry rifle squad Marine began carrying the M27. The distinction between riflemen and automatic riflemen was removed entirely. No single Marine held a specialized suppression role anymore. Instead, every member of the squad can gain the ability to deliver automatic fire if required. The capability was no longer concentrated in one position. It was distributed across the entire unit. Losing one Marine no longer removed a unique function from the team. It only reduced overall strength without changing the fundamental structure. There is another technical distinction that is not immediately obvious in specifications. The M249 uses an open bolt system. This design is necessary for sustained automatic weapons because it allows airflow through the chamber between bursts, helping manage heat buildup. However, the mechanism introduces movement at the moment of firing. As the bolt travels forward before discharge, that motion reduces precision. The M249 was therefore optimized for suppressive fire over areas rather than exact point shooting. The M27, in contrast, fires from a closed bolt position. This is the same operating principle used in standard infantry rifles. In close engagement distances, such as hallways or doorways, this allows rounds to be placed with far greater precision. Instead of general suppression, the weapon can consistently hit specific targets behind cover. In environments where enemies are positioned behind walls or tight cover rather than exposed in open terrain, this capability changes the outcome of engagements. The requirement is not just to suppress, but to neutralize accurately within confined space. The Marine Corps needed a weapon that could perform both roles within the same environment. The M27 was developed to meet that requirement. This was not a minor upgrade. It represented a full reversal of decades of thinking about squad automatic weapons. The combat environment in Fallujah during November of 2004 marked one of the most intense urban battles American forces had faced in decades. Units operated through a city that had been heavily prepared for defense, with structures reinforced, streets blocked, and tactics refined specifically to counter American entry methods. Opposing fighters in the Jilin district studied American fire team movement closely. They developed tactics based on predictable patterns of entry and clearance. A central focus of those tactics was the M249. Within standard Marine fire teams, the automatic rifleman occupied a clearly defined position. His weapon was easily identifiable by sound and function, and the team depended on his sustained fire to maintain pressure during movement. Because of this, he became the highest priority target in many engagements. Removing him did not simply eliminate one Marine. It removed the squad's primary source of continuous automatic fire and forced the remaining members to operate outside their intended structure. In Fallujah, enemy forces exploited this understanding. Engagement behavior reflected deliberate targeting of that role. After-action reports from Iraq and Afghanistan highlighted recurring problems. These were not isolated mechanical faults, but repeated issues emerging under combat conditions that combined dust, heat, and sustained room-to-room fighting. Belt feeding systems became unreliable in confined interiors. Magazine adapters performed inconsistently under stress. Extended firing in enclosed spaces increased heat buildup beyond expected limits. When the system failed, the squad immediately lost its dedicated suppression capability and reverted to standard rifle fire alone. Marine Corps leadership responded by systematically reviewing these reports. Across multiple units, the same conclusion appeared repeatedly. The issue was not simply equipment performance, it was a mismatch between the weapon's design purpose and the environment in which it was being used. Commanders noted that when the automatic rifle failed, the fire team was not simply weakened, it was forced into an entirely different operating condition than the doctrine it had trained for. The reports described this gap with unusual clarity. They recorded not only mechanical stoppages, but the tactical consequences that followed directly from them. Units returning from combat did not request incremental improvements to the existing system. Instead, they identified the need for a fundamentally different approach to squad-level automatic fire. The M249 reports coming out of Phantom Fury described a system that served as the primary automatic fire asset for infantry fire teams. Across multiple units and multiple engagements, it appeared in accounts where squads conducted close-range room-clearing operations while operating with reduced capability at the most critical moments. When translated beyond formal reporting language and back into the reality of those buildings, the meaning becomes direct. Marine infantry forces, in some of the most intense fighting of the Iraq War, were relying on a weapon their tactical framework required, yet that weapon was not consistently delivering what the doctrine expected. That mismatch between operational doctrine and battlefield performance is where lethal risk emerges. The Marine Corps possessed the data. The remaining question was whether leadership would act on what the data implied. That conclusion was formed inside the combat environments of Fallujah. Turning it into policy took 3 additional years. Field deployment of a solution required 5. Completing full transition required another 7 years. By 2018, the Marine Corps formalized the change. Every Marine within infantry rifle squads was issued the M27. The role previously assigned to the M249 as the primary squad automatic weapon, a role it had held since 1984, was formally ended. This shift was institutional in timeline, but the decision itself came from combat experience and commanders willing to interpret what those experiences revealed. The United States Army did not follow the same path. Neither did other NATO partners. They reviewed similar operational evidence from Iraq and Afghanistan, but reached different conclusions based on their own doctrinal focus and how they anticipated future conflict. For militaries prioritizing large-scale conventional warfare scenarios, sustained belt-fed fire at squad level still represented a critical capability that the M27 could not fully replicate. That interpretation was not incorrect. It simply reflected a different understanding of future battlefield requirements. The logic behind the M249 remained valid for the problem it was originally designed to solve. Marine leadership fully understood what was being surrendered. High-volume sustained automatic fire from a 200-round system delivered in under a minute, along with the suppression advantage that came with it in open terrain engagements, was no longer central to their chosen doctrine. The trade was accepted because the Marine Corps anticipated a different type of war. Amphibious entry operations, expeditionary missions, dense urban environments, and complex close-quarter engagements defined their operational reality. That reality did not align with the environment the M249 was created to dominate. As a result, the Corps prioritized a weapon system aligned with the conflicts it was actually fighting, rather than the conflicts originally outlined in procurement assumptions. For opposing forces engaging Marine units equipped with the M27 after 2012, the tactical environment changed significantly. Earlier engagement methods relied on identifying the automatic rifleman by position and sound, targeting that role first, and disrupting squad firepower by removing its central suppression element. That approach depended on a visible and identifiable point of automatic fire within the team structure. With the M27 distribution model, that focal point no longer existed. Every Marine carried equivalent capability. Suppressing one individual no longer produced a decisive opening. The tactical effect was reduced to marginal impact rather than structural disruption. In close terrain environments, such as those in Helmand Province, even small reductions in effectiveness did not translate into exploitable advantage. The engagement space offered no time for adaptation. This is not a question of invulnerability. It is a matter of structural geometry in combat. Earlier systems created predictable roles that could be isolated. The newer system removed that predictability. Adapting to such a shift requires time, and in close-range combat, time does not exist in usable form for either side. The Marine Corps decision to remove the M249 from infantry rifle squads reflected a rare level of institutional honesty. It required prioritizing field experience from non-commissioned leaders over long-standing procurement assumptions that had supported the system for decades. It also required acknowledging that a weapon widely trusted across NATO forces was not optimally suited for the specific combat conditions the Marine Corps encountered. That acknowledgement led to the deliberate exchange of one capability set for another. The original system was not defective. It was misaligned with the operational environment in which it was ultimately used. That mismatch carries consequences, and those consequences are borne by the personnel in direct contact with the fight. In military history, the most significant failures are rarely mechanical. They are conceptual. They occur when forces prepare for one type of conflict and encounter another. The lessons from Phantom Fury made that distinction visible. The resulting decision reflected an effort to act before accumulated friction turned into irreversible cost. The rejection of the M249 in its squad role was not a rejection of the weapon alone. It was a rejection of allowing outdated assumptions to dictate future risk. That willingness to adjust doctrine under pressure is what defined the outcome. CTA. For more analysis like this, continue following for future breakdowns. Please leave your thoughts about this content in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.